I was 30 years old when my mother finally said out loud what I had known since I was a child. We were sitting around the dining table after a family dinner, the kind that always felt more like an obligation than a gathering. My sister was talking about her husband's work stress, her kids' school fees, and the latest problem they needed help solving. My parents listened with full attention, nodding, offering advice, promising support. I sat there quietly, as I always did, pushing food around my plate, already invisible. At some point, the conversation shifted. My mother sighed and said almost casually, "You know how it is. Your sister's family has to come first now. They have responsibilities." She looked at me like she expected understanding, like this was obvious, like it didn't sting. Something in me tightened, but I stayed quiet. I had spent my whole life swallowing moments like this. When my sister needed help with rent, my savings were offered. When her kids needed gifts, my plans were postponed. When she was tired, I was expected to be patient. I told myself it was normal, that this was just what family did. Then my father nodded in agreement. "That's just how it is," he said. "They have children. You'll understand." That was the moment, not because it was shocking, but because it was final. There was no hesitation in his voice, no acknowledgement that I, too, had a life. I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. I felt something colder settle in my chest, a clarity I had never allowed myself before. "So I come last," I said quietly. My mother frowned, as if I was being dramatic. "Don't say it like that," she replied. "It's not about you being last. It's just priorities." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized this conversation had been happening my entire life without words. Every canceled plan, every time I was told to be the bigger one, every sacrifice that was expected, never thanked. This was just the first time they said it plainly. My father didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just stayed silent, which somehow hurt more than agreement. "Good to know," I said. The table went quiet. My sister avoided my eyes. My mother looked confused, like she thought I would argue or cry or demand reassurance. But I didn't. I smiled faintly, excused myself, and went to the bathroom. I locked the door and stared at my reflection, searching for the person who had spent decades trying to earn a place that was never meant to be mine. In that moment, I understood something painful and freeing at the same time. I wasn't unloved because I wasn't enough. I was overlooked because I was convenient. I was reliable. I was the one who would always understand. Standing there, I felt the weight of every unspoken expectation lift just a little. If I was always going to be last in their lives, then I no longer had to destroy myself trying to be first. That night, as I drove home alone, the words echoed in my head, not with bitterness but resolve. Good to know, because from that moment on I decided something quietly and firmly: I would stop waiting to be chosen. I would choose myself. The decision didn't come with fireworks or dramatic announcements. It arrived quietly, the way real change often does. The morning after that dinner, I woke up with an unfamiliar feeling in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, but determination. For the first time, I wasn't planning my day around what my family might need. I was thinking about myself, and it felt almost wrong, like stepping into a room I had been told my whole life was off limits. I started with money, because money had always been the easiest way for them to reach me. I opened a new account and moved my savings, every dollar that I had earned through overtime shifts and skipped vacations. No more shared access, no more temporary loans that never came back. I told myself this wasn't selfish, it was survival. Each time I checked my balance, I felt something close to relief. Then came the plans. I stopped keeping my calendar open, just in case. I booked a small trip for myself, nothing extravagant, just a few days away where no one knew me as the dependable one. When my mother called and hinted that I should cancel because my sister was overwhelmed, I said I couldn't. My voice shook, but I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, and when she finally spoke, there was disappointment in her tone. I ended the call anyway. The hardest part was emotional separation. I stopped answering every message immediately. I didn't rush to fix problems that weren't mine. When my sister complained about her life, I listened politely and then changed the subject. For years, I had been her emotional support without realizing it. Stepping back made me feel guilty, like I was abandoning a role I had been trained to play. But with each boundary I set, the guilt faded a little more. I used that energy on myself instead. I signed up for classes I had always postponed. I started going on long walks after work, letting my thoughts wander without being interrupted by someone else's crisis. I slept better. I laughed more, even if sometimes it was alone. Slowly, I began to recognize the person I was becoming, someone with preferences, limits, and dreams that didn't need approval. What surprised me most was how little my family noticed at first. They didn't ask why I was busier or why I seemed different. They just assumed I would still be there when it counted. That assumption hurt, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized how invisible my sacrifices had been all along. There were lonely moments, nights when I questioned myself, when I wondered if choosing myself meant I would end up completely alone. But even in those moments, there was peace. A deep, steady peace that came from no longer betraying myself. By the time months had passed, my life felt balanced in a way it never had before. I wasn't waiting for praise. I wasn't hoping for fairness. I was building something quiet and strong, brick by brick, just for me. And then the phone rang one evening, long after dinner, with my mother's name lighting up the screen. The tone of her voice was different this time, urgent, trembling. That was when I knew something had gone wrong. My mother didn't waste time on pleasantries. Her voice was tight, strained, the way it only got when panic was sitting just beneath the surface. She told me there had been an accident, that everything had spiraled at once, that my sister's family was in trouble and didn't know how they were going to manage. The details came out in fragments: hospital bills, missed work, mounting expenses, but the message beneath it all was clear before she ever said the words. "We need help," she said. I sat on the edge of my couch, phone pressed to my ear, listening. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer solutions. I noticed how familiar this felt, how naturally the expectations settled into the conversation, as if my role had never changed. There was no apology for past words, no acknowledgement of distance, just urgency and assumption. My father took the phone next. His voice was softer, almost gentle, the way it used to be when he needed something from me. He talked about family, about sticking together in hard times. He reminded me of everything they had done for me growing up, every roof over my head, every meal on the table. The unspoken conclusion hung heavy in the air. Now it was my turn. As he spoke, I felt an old reflex stirring inside me, the instinct to say yes before thinking, to fix everything and absorb the cost later. For a moment, I imagined transferring the money, watching my hard-won stability disappear overnight. I imagined the quiet resentment returning, the self-blame, the exhaustion. That future felt painfully familiar. Then my sister's voice came on the line. She was crying. Real tears this time, not frustration or complaint. She said she didn't know who else to turn to, that they were scared, that I had always been the responsible one, the dependable one. She didn't mention how she had benefited from my sacrifices before. She didn't mention the words our mother had spoken months earlier. She didn't have to. They were still there, clear as day. I felt sympathy, I really did. I wasn't heartless. But sympathy wasn't the same as obligation anymore. I realized something important in that moment. They weren't calling because they missed me or valued me. They were calling because they needed access to what I had protected. I asked a few calm questions. How much? How soon? What other options had they tried? The answers were vague, rushed. They hadn't looked for loans. They hadn't downsized. They hadn't considered that this crisis, like so many before it, might require sacrifice from them instead of me. The silence stretched when I didn't immediately agree. I could almost hear the confusion forming, the disbelief. This wasn't how the story usually went. I was supposed to step in by now, reassure them, take the weight off their shoulders. My mother finally said my name, sharp and pleading at the same time. "You have savings," she said. It wasn't a question. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. I thought about the months I had spent building a life that felt safe. I thought about the night at the dinner table, the certainty in her voice when she told me where I stood. "I do," I said carefully. "And I have plans for it." No one spoke. The line was quiet, frozen as if time itself had stalled. And in that silence, I knew the next words I spoke would change everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse or insult. I spoke slowly, the way you do when you finally understand yourself and don't need to be understood by anyone else. I told them I was sorry they were going through something so difficult. I said I hoped everyone would be okay, and then I said no. At first, they thought they had misheard me. My mother asked me to repeat myself, her tone sharp with disbelief. My father sighed heavily like I was being unreasonable. My sister went quiet, the crying stopping so suddenly it felt rehearsed. I stayed calm. I explained that I couldn't pay. Not now, not ever again. My mother reminded me of family duty. She said this wasn't the time to be selfish, that emergencies changed things. I let her finish before responding. I reminded her gently of that night at the dinner table, of her exact words. I told her I had believed her, that I had taken her advice seriously and reorganized my life around it. "You said my sister's family would always come first," I said, "and that I would understand, so I did." There was a long pause. I could almost hear the moment sinking in, the way realization creeps in slowly when it's uncomfortable. My father tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I told them that putting myself first hadn't been an act of revenge, it had been an act of survival. That for years I had given until there was nothing left, believing love meant sacrifice without limits. My sister finally spoke, her voice small and defensive. She said she never asked me to do all that she didn't know I felt this way. I didn't argue. I told her that was part of the problem, that my needs had never been loud enough to matter. My mother's voice cracked then. She said she never meant for me to feel like I didn't matter, that I was twisting her words. I didn't fight her on it. I just told her how those words had landed, how they had confirmed everything I had felt my whole life. Intent didn't erase impact. They asked what they were supposed to do now. I suggested practical things, payment plans, assistance programs, downsizing, asking other relatives. The solutions sounded foreign to them because they had never needed them before. I had always been the solution. The call ended without resolution. There was no apology, no understanding, no closure. Just shock, just the sudden absence of the safety net they had taken for granted. In the weeks that followed, the messages slowed. When they did come, they were cautious, uncertain. The power dynamic had shifted, and none of us knew how to stand in it yet. I felt sadness, yes, but I also felt something I had never felt before, lightness. For the first time, my future wasn't tied to someone else's expectations. I wasn't frozen in place, waiting for permission to live. I had chosen myself, and the world hadn't ended. They were the ones left frozen, staring at the consequences of words they thought didn't matter. And as I moved forward, building a life that belonged entirely to me, I finally understood that peace doesn't come from being needed. It comes from being free.